Some years went by, and I happened to be in Rome staying with some Italian friends, when my host asked me if I'd like to visit the Pope. Of course I was thrilled, and clad in all black with a long veil, I was admitted into the august presence in company with my host and his sister. When His Holiness suddenly addressed me, asking if I was a Catholic, I was taken aback for a moment, and then replied that I was a Muslim. What possessed me, I don't pretend to know, as I had not given a thought to Islam for many years. A match was lit, and I then and there determined to read up and study the faith. I don't think there are four. I can't wait to find out more about Lady Evelyn Cobbold. She sounds like a fascinating character. Do you think she should have anything in common with Fatima Keats at all?
Well, they're both converts.
Yeah, true.
But on a serious note, I know a little bit about Lady Cobbold. But I do have a contact with her grandson,
Right.
Angus Sladen. I think we should go and visit Angus and see what we can learn more about his grandmother.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
You up for that?
Yeah. Weren't we supposed to go visit her grave up in Scotland?
Yeah, we were, but Angus tells me we're not able to do that now.
Oh, that's a shame. Why is that?
I'm not 100% certain. Why don't you ask him when we meet him?
Brilliant. Okay.
Hello.
Good to meet you.
How are you, Angus?
Hey, nice to meet you.
Come on in, I'll lead the way. Why don't you come and sit over here, and I'll sit here.
Thank you very much. Oh, thank you for having us.
No, it's very good. Now, what can I tell you?
Well, as you know, we really want to know more about your ancestor, Lady Cobbold. What can you tell us about her? What's your perspective, your memory of her even? Yeah, we're all ears.
Well, let's start from the beginning of what I can remember. I was born in 1950, and she was born in 1867. And latterly, the only bits I remember are in Scotland. She had, as you know, an estate in Scotland. So my first memory really is of seeing her there when I was about 7 or 8. And then she moved into a nursing home in Inverness, and my father was her grandson, her eldest daughter. And my father was brought up by her because his parents lived abroad. So he spent a lot of his time with her, and in fact inherited the estate from her. So as you know, she spent the winters when she was young in North Africa. Her father actually rented properties in North Africa to save money, oddly enough. He was wealthy by anybody's standards, but not quite as wealthy as he used to be. That's really why, or partly why, she developed a love of the whole world of the Middle East, and particularly the Muslim faith, because the children and the servants were obviously Muslims.
And I believe she spoke Arabic at a young age
She
too.
learnt it, obviously, and I don't know how she perfected it, because she could read and write it as well.
Right.
I've got stuff of hers. I can't tell you which one she wrote, but I've got certainly lots of books in Arabic, so she clearly could read it. And certainly she could speak it very well.
We know that as a child, she spent much of her holidays in North Africa, probably Algeria. She obviously was running in and out of mosques and playing with the local children and was immersed in their culture. And of course, with children, there's no sense of class, no sense of colour, no sense of nationality, wealth or privilege. So she, you know, immersed herself in the Algerian way of life.
She had that aspect in her character, which was this desire, this fascination for the Orient, for the East, for something which wasn't what was mundane and boring. And I think that was part of her fascination for the Islamic world.
She had a husband who was very supportive.
Yeah.
They married in the 1890s and in Egypt, in fact. But of all things, he was from a very major brewing beer cup family in East Anglia, so east of London. Very wealthy, a very nice man. They had 3 children, including my grandmother. And I think after she'd had the children, she started to have a yen for traveling back to Egypt and the Middle East. And he obviously allowed her to. She did that, first of all, in 1911.
That's an interesting year for us, because that's the year our great-great-great-grandfather passed away at the age of 83.
Really?
Yeah, in Bridge, which is in the east of Manchester.
Really?
And she was adventuring back into the Middle East.
Adventuring back in, and she had a privately printed book called Wayfarers in the Libyan Desert.
Can you remind us what was the year she converted to Islam? Do you remember?
Very good point. There isn't a specific date in
pilgrimage to
the
Mecca.
pilgrimage. There doesn't seem to be a conversion moment. It's a period. And I think she says there that when she was about 20, she was in Rome visiting friends and has asked to join a group going for an audience with the Pope, and is asked, is she Christian? And she says, no, I'm a Muslim. After the First World War, she and her husband separate.
Yeah.
They do not divorce,
No?
they separate. He's still very fond of her, without a doubt. I don't know the ins and outs of how it happened, but they were definitely going their separate ways.
By the end of the First World War, the Turkish Ottoman Empire was drastically reduced in the Middle East. And the reward, particularly for the tribes of the peninsula, was the granting of their own land, their own kingdoms, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states that we know today. The confidence of these new kingdoms began to become slightly abrasive towards the British government. And that's why when converts like Lady Evelyn Coble went to the Middle East, they were treated with a degree of suspicion.
She, as a convert, as a British person, she needed permission to go, especially going there as a sole woman. And she writes to the King's office, the Saudi King's office, and doesn't get any reply back.
And I think there were a number of factors that kind of worked against her. The first one was that she was a woman, and conservative Arab Muslim society didn't really know how to treat her. Secondly, she was a European. She was British. So she wasn't familiar with Islamic civilization. So there were communication problems. Also, she may have been treated with a degree of suspicion.
I'll show you something which is interesting, because she was aware of what she was doing when she performed the Hajj. Here is a letter written from Jeddah She'd gone out to Jeddah, hoping to get the permission from the king until such time as she had permission. And this letter is to my father, who was at school, boarding school, age 17 at home. And he's called Toby. And it says, "Dear Toby, I was so pleased to get your letter. My first post since I left London. I have now got permission from the king to do my pilgrimage and will be the first European woman to enter the sacred cities." Wow. So she knew perfectly well she was doing something very special and certainly revelled in it when she got home, because once she wrote the book the following year, it did have quite a sensational impact. And she did do lecture tours and showing pictures and things like that. So there was quite an involvement with the Muslim community.
Lady Cobold was happy to call herself the first European woman to do the Hajj. And clearly this was a motivation for her, and she speaks about it in her book, Pilgrimage to Mecca. So she says that she had this in mind when she was actually on the Hajj, that I am the first person to pass this threshold. So she became a symbolic figure, shall we say, of that generation of converts to Islam.
So do we know what her children thought about this, your father, and how they felt?
Yes, I mean, my grandmother, her eldest daughter, died only 2 years after her. Her son, sadly, was killed in the Guards Chapel in 1944 when one of those flying bombs fell on it. And then her third child, her other daughter, sadly married one of the Hambro banking family who was actually deputy governor of the Bank of England. She died rather suddenly after she'd had some children, aged 32. So they were all alive, of course, when she, not necessarily doing the Hajj, because the last one wasn't alive, but they will all have had opinions. They were very fond of her, but they, I think, found it a little bit difficult because they didn't really understand it. On a wider note, how was she held in society? Well, she came from a very good family, very aristocratic family. She had great wealth. You know, people just accepted it, really. I don't think there was any antipathy, particularly, about her being a Muslim. It was just unusual.
And so was she linked in with the Woking Muslim community?
Yes, I know she knew them. I don't know the relationship between the early British Muslims between each other.
Hello.
Hello, alaikum salam. Welcome to the Shah Jahan Mosque in Woking. How are you?
Mohammed Habib.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm Stephen Longdon.
Okay, nice to see you.
And this is...
Hello.
I'm
nice
Ruby.
To see you. Ruby.
My niece.
And interesting. What brings you to visit the Shah Jahan Mosque today?
Well, both Ruby and I are the descendants of one of the notable Victorian Muslims, Robert Rashid Stanley.
Okay, wow.
And as we have been looking at the family history, learning more about him.
So that's what brings you here today. Is this your first time here?
This is my first time here, but I believe, Ruby, you've been in the past, haven't you?
Came a few years ago with my family.
Okay, with your family?
Yeah.
Okay. So as you know, the history of the mosque, it's the oldest mosque in Britain. So the Shah Jahan Mosque is the first purpose-built mosque, not just in Britain, but actually in northwestern Europe. So the gentleman who built the mosque was called Gottlieb Leitner. He was a professor who'd mastered 50 languages. He was actually born in Budapest in 1841, but his sort of exposure to Islam came when he moved to Turkey at the age of 8. And the reason why he built the masjid, the mosque, is so students that were coming to study at the university, they had somewhere to pray. The architect who designed the mosque was actually a Christian architect called William Isaac Chambers. He was from Guildford, which is a neighbouring city. And interestingly enough, he had never designed a mosque before. So he's based the mosque on Indian, Egyptian and Turkish architecture. And then the lady who paid for the mosque, she was the Begum of Bhopal, Princess Shah Jahan, and she was a Muslim, and she donated approximately £5,000. And then the mosque was completed in the year 1889 as the first purpose-built mosque. But the history is very interesting because you have somebody Jewish behind the whole vision, you have a Christian designing it, and then you have a Muslim princess, a female, paying for it.
Now, Lady Evelyn Cobbold was very much a Muslim on her own terms. She wore Mayfair fashion. Even when she goes to meet some of her friends, you know, including some people who are really devout scholars of Islam, she has there are pictures of her, Muslim men who were her friends in full Islamic garb, and there is Lady Evelyn with her hat and her skirt and looking very British. But neither her nor her friends saw a contradiction. It was her way of being Muslim. And the reason why she loved Scotland so much, she had an estate, a hunting lodge, Glenaig it's called, just north of Inverness. Very beautiful. She liked the peace that she got there, the tranquility. Her end days, she just spent it over there, only coming to London when she needed to. And for her, it was a way of leading a peaceful life, conforming, to all her traditions. She loved deer hunting. She was a very good deer hunter. It was her way of conforming to all of that, but at the same time, having the peace and the tranquility to practice Islam on her own terms.
Excuse me for a moment. Let's see what I've got up here. I will show you just the fact that she liked deer stalking in Scotland.
Oh, yeah.
So this shows the copy of the game book.
Oh, wow.
And the sort of things she was doing. And you'll see there, Lady Evelyn Cobbold, during that period, 1925, October the 5th, through to the 14th, she was shooting virtually every day, and the number of stags she shot. And this was how tough it was. It's wet, steep hills and mountainous. But it was acceptable for women to do that, but not shooting pheasants and things with a shotgun.
Why the difference? What's the etiquette I'm missing there?
Because that really wasn't competitive, whereas it is if you're in a line of people.
Oh, men didn't want any challenges.
And that is her, as I said, these are posed photographs, I think, particularly, but it shows the sort of ground, and you can see how steep it is. She was mad keen on her deer stalking. And that's my father. I think I'm just going to get the other album, excuse me. Let's see what we got here. Oh, Hindenburg, that's my father, aged about... That's her.
Oh, wow.
In probably about 1925, 30. This is the letter from Marmaduke Pictou.
Wow. You've seen this handwriting before? 1924.
She'd sent him a copy of the book.
Ah, that's his reply.
Reply. He says he skimmed through it, and he will do a nice review, he says, in his book, in his...
quarterly, wasn't it?
Quarterly, yeah. This is a picture of her when she was probably the last picture of an old lady before she went into a nursing home, really. Probably about 1956, I would think. So she's quite old by then. She's in her mid-80s.
Yeah.
As it happened, as you know, when she died, In 1963, my father got the Imam from Woking to come all the way up to the north of Scotland.
Of course.
There was nothing else available in those days.
Yes.
So
it was a very difficult winter, I believe, that year.
It was an impossible winter. It was one of the coldest on record.
When she died, it was on one of the coldest days of the year. The ground was frozen. She wanted to be buried quickly, in line with most Muslims. And so to dig a grave in this frozen ground was incredibly hard. But those around her respected her wishes and did that. And not only was it incredibly difficult to dig in this frozen ground, they had to do the same walk that we did, 20 kilometers up a very tough mountainside. So I wonder at her insistence to be buried so high up, but apparently it was one of her favourite spots when she was out shooting deer. Well, this is somewhere up in the Highlands. I'm being harassed by bumblebees and eaten alive by midges. And I'm knackered. Without my sticks, I would be finished. But I'm going to do it, kiddo, and it's 20 clicks. Yeah? Samir's holding the phone.
Okay, Daisy. Hello.
We had been planning to go and visit her grave as part of this exploration of Victorian Muslims, but I understand we can't. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yes, I think it's difficult. Where her grave is up a very rough track, which, if you're driving, would take you about 40 minutes or 50 minutes, and into a beautiful glen. It's fabulous. But the owner who bought it from me in 2002, he wants it to remain very private. Now, there's nothing to stop people walking in there, and people can walk. That's not a problem. But I have to say, carrying heavy film equipment wouldn't really be reasonable. Where this photograph is taken from is almost exactly where she's buried.
Okay.
That's a picture of the grave. It says side by side, my father's one on the left and she's on the right. And then it doesn't show the brass plaque, which has a quotation from the Quran. Something else I want to show you. Over here. This is the most amazing portrait, and that was done probably at the time she got engaged or married, 1892, I think that is. Definitely not a Muslim at that point.
No.
He's in the small world there, which is not necessarily what you necessarily want.
You managed to find someone who can do a biography.
About 12 years ago, I suppose, I was 13 years ago, I was contacted by a cousin I'd never met. And she used to work for the Royal Geographical Society magazine. I think she used to edit it. And she wanted to do a biography. So she came along and looked at all the material I'd got. And she said, well, it's all wonderful, but it only covers a certain period of her life. What about her early life? There must have been masses of letters. So I would love for somebody to do a biography, but there isn't enough. What you see here is just about 99% of it. There is nothing much more.
I think we should go home and suggest to your mother we could have another project for her here. You know, I think she's a candidate for that. We've had an amazing journey.
Well, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having us.
So, Ruby, what did you think of Lady Cobold's story?
Really interesting, and I think it's amazing the information the family archive still have on her. It's amazing. Reminds me of what Mum and Grandad did for Robert Rashid, especially her correspondence with Pickett Hall. I think that was interesting.
Yeah, Marmaduke Pickett Hall. Now, there's a guy. Did you realise that he produced one of the first translations of the Quran in English?
I think I had heard that, but I don't know very much about the man, to be honest.
Well, your mum does,
Right.
being the amazing historian that she is, and she has told me where the best place to go and learn more about him.
Brilliant.
Fancy a trip?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it.